Hello everyone, welcome to this video discussion. This time I am going to discuss a research conducted by Simeon Yates from the Open University United Kingdom entitled Oral and Written Linguistic Aspects of Computer Conferencing, a corpus-based study. Now the primary goal why I am sharing this research is for you students to understand the differences, the contrastive elements among written and spoken discourses and computer-mediated discourses. So it is hoped that through this presentation, you will be able to understand the differences in terms of the features present in written, spoken, and computer-mediated discourses. So just an introduction, this study reports the findings of a large corpus-based comparison between spoken, written, and computer-mediated communication discourse. So the primary goal of this study is to create a clear picture of the differences of these three types of discourses: the spoken, written, and computer-mediated. The various factors across which comparisons are made were drawn from a Hallidayan model of language use and focus upon the textual, interpersonal, and ideational aspects of language. So this is primarily anchored, or this research is primarily anchored on the theory of Halliday in 1978, which centers on these aspects of speech, writing, and CMC. And these are textual, interpersonal, and ideational. The textual aspects of CMC discourse are then considered through such measures as type or token ratios and lexical density. So primarily when we talk about textual aspects, we are dealing with textual features, okay, or the linguistic features of the text. The interpersonal in CMC is explored through the examination of pronoun use. So interpersonal here means the connectivity, okay, the connectedness between the discourse maker and the one who is decoding the discourses. So the better way to understand the interpersonal aspect is by exploring pronoun usage. The presentation of the ideational within the CMC discourse is considered through an exploration of modal auxiliary use within the CMC corpus. So in order for you to really understand the ideational aspect, you need to consider also the use of different modal auxiliaries present in the discourses. So again, this research dwells on the study of these three aspects of speech, written discourse, and also computer-mediated discourse. Now, in terms of the data collection, the computer revolution has brought with it new forms of discourse which also deserve systematic study. One of these is electronic mail. Electronic mail reveals features of both speech and writing, because when you are making mails or emails, there is also speech, because it's as if you are directly communicating with the person you are exchanging emails with. At the same time, obviously, it's also a written form of discourse, because you are using a computer medium for you to exchange conversations or discourses with a person or with a group of people. Like other forms of discourse, new as well as old, it deserves the attention of future corpus workers that's suggested by Johansson in 1991. There are a considerable number of different sources that could be used to build a corpus of CMC interactions and utterances. Now, if we are to base it on the current social media or the virtual communities that we actually have a vast array of these sources. So we have social media. We also have other platforms, for example, email. But before, there were electronic mail, there were bulletin boards, there were also computer conferencing, and other synchronous messaging systems. Now, in the creation of the CMC corpus used in this research, while one obvious method for the creation of a CMC corpus would be to download all available material, this would produce a data set of excessively large proportions that might prove too unwieldy. So, it also ignores the fact that the corpus must be to some extent comparable to the written and spoken corpora already in existence. So that is why there was a limitation in terms of the corpora used for the analysis. So let's go now to the findings of this research. So as what I mentioned a while ago, to better understand the differences among these three types of discourses, spoken, written, computer-mediated, we'll dwell first on understanding the textual or the linguistic features of computer-mediated communication. So One key element here is knowing what type or token ratios of vocabulary use there is in the computer-mediated communication. So one difference between speech and writing that many researchers have commented upon is that of the differing modes of production and consumption. Speech is produced on the fly and is needed to be consumed, heard in the same rapid and dynamic manner. So, for example, when someone speaks to you or converses with you, of course, you need to give feedback. So, that is why speech is considered produced on the fly because it is intended to be consumed, heard, processed, interpreted right away. And on one hand, writing is static. It is produced at the pace set by the writers alone and can be consumed at any speed that the reader chooses. So for example, if you have the written discourse there, you may opt not to read it right away or immediately. Okay? It's for you as reader, it depends on your pace as to when you choose to read the contents of that written discourse. The effects of such differences in production are likely, it is claimed, to generate differences in the language used as well. So because of the necessity or the urgency of the consumption and production of both speech and written discourses, there are also variations with languages being used. So one aspect of this concerns vocabulary use. Let's take into consideration the statement of Schaaf and Danielowicz in 1987. As a consequence of these differences, speakers tend to operate with a narrower range of lexical choices than writers. So primarily, there is only a pool of words used when people are dealing with spoken discourses, okay? Compared to writers. Producing language on the fly, they hardly have time to sift through all of the possible choices that might make and may typically settle on the first words that occur to them. So if it's written, or if you are making or producing written discourses, then of course you have enough time to think about the words that you need to use, or you have enough time to choose the best words that will really convey the message you have in mind. So this one results in, or the result is that the vocabulary of spoken language is more limited in variety. Okay? So primarily, if we are looking at the vocabulary usage, there is actually a big difference in terms of the one that is produced written and the one that is produced spoken. Okay? In order to examine the differing use of vocabulary more empirically, Schaaf and Danielowicz makes use or made use of the type or token ratio. The type or token ratio used is that of the number of different words, we call them types, and divided by the total number of words or the tokens. So we have different grammatical tokens found or present in a discourse. So you also need to consider that one. So for example, if you have a statement there, you have to identify the number of different words or the major lexical items present there, and identify also the total number of words present there, including those that are minor words only. For example, we have prepositions, pronouns, things like those. In this calculation, all words of all types are counted. A more rigorous measure of vocabulary use will be to calculate the ratio of the number of different lexical items, or we call them lexical types, to the total number of lexical items, or we call them as lexical tokens. So it is writing that demonstrates the greatest variation around the mean level of vocabulary use as compared to speech and CMC, which have comparable variances. So in this case, vocabulary use is dependent on a large number of sociolinguistic issues. So the vocabulary here, or the vocabulary used in a specific discourse, let's say CMC, would also project the sociolinguistic issues present in the ecology, communicative ecology of the discourse maker. And despite having a clear relationship to the production and consumption of a text, it is not the only measure of the textuality of an utterance. That's true because not only vocabulary use has to be considered in analyzing textual features. You also need to consider the other elements such as the structural elements, okay, or the syntactic elements present in a discourse. So to give you a clear example of how the lexical density of CMC is computed, Halliday in 1985 begins his explanation of lexical density with the following examples. Let's say we have here discourse 1. If you invest in a rail facility, this implies that you are going to be committed for a long time. So how did we compute the lexical density of 0.35? So it's just easy. You go back to the discourse itself and then count the number of lexical items present here. So lexical items are the major words that you can see here. For example, you have here the verb invest, and then the noun rail facility, the verb implies, the verb committed, and then we have here an adjective long, and then the noun time. So if you count these lexical items, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 words versus the grammatical items. When you say grammatical items, you just have to count each of the words present in this discourse. So all in all, we have, I guess, 20 words here. So 7 divided by 20, we have 0.35 as the lexical density. So that's how you compute it. Now, in traditional computations or means of computing the lexical density, you could actually do this one. But in present times, there are already a number of softwares or programs that can help you compute the lexical density. Not only that, there are also a number of programs which can aid you in identifying the number of tokens present in a corpus-based study or in a corpus, in a corpora. So investment in a rail facility implies a long-term commitment. That's discourse number 2. So if you notice, just again, same process, count the lexical items, then divide it by the number of grammatical items present in this discourse. So lexical density can be described as a measure of the information density within a text. So that simply means that the denser the text is, the more information there is present in that discourse. In this sense, it measures the ease or difficulty with which a text can be processed by an individual reading it in a specific social context. For example, or that is the cognitive effort required to process a text. Let's say it's really dense because there are a number of lexical items found in the discourse. That means to say that there are more difficult words to be processed by the one decoding the discourses, right? Unlike when it's less dense, then that means simpler words are used in the discourses, which means to say that it is easier to understand the entirety of the discourse because of the simplicity of the chosen words. So another aspect that we can look at when we study the differences of these types of discourses is the ideational aspect. Now, when we talk about ideational aspects of CMC, as what was mentioned a while ago, you can delve into the study of the modal auxiliaries or the modality present in the discourses. Hodge and Kress in 1988 began their discussion of modality in language by noting that in everyday communication, it manifestly matters a great deal what weight we attach to an utterance. A statement may be said emphatically without qualifications, and we know that we are being asked to believe that it is true. So we also need to understand the weight of the statements and the semantics, their semantics that we put into a word or into a discourse. Or it may be hedged with I think, it may be that, okay? Because hedges could also affect the level of seriousness or could also affect how another person, okay, or the person whom you are conversing with should understand or decipher the discourses that you make as the discourse maker. Perhaps it is spoken with rising intonation like a question, and we know that the speaker is offering the statement more tentatively. Or it may be said with a laugh or an ironic, sarcastic tone, and we know the speaker does not believe the statement at all. So that is why it is important also to explore the ideational aspects, specifically the modality side, because we also need to understand the correct semantics, okay, of the discourses made by the discourse maker. So these methods of encoding attitude towards a statement or the content of an utterance are described by Hodge and Kress as the modality system of language. In Coates in 1983 specifies that there are 5 semantic groups of modal auxiliaries. First one is the modals of obligation and necessity. So these modals include must, need, should, ought. Meaning, when you use these modals in your discourses, then there is high level of obligation or necessity, okay, being included in the meaning or semantics of your discourse. So when you use must, need, should, or ought, that means there is also high level of necessity, okay, or urgency. The second group is composed of modals of ability and possibility. So there are only 2. We have can and could. We also have the models of epistemic possibility, which include may and might. We have models of volition and prediction, will and shall. And lastly, we have hypothetical models such as would and should. So again, you might want to explore these things the models use because they tell you about the ideas, okay? The ideas present in the discourses. And it also tells us about whether it is necessary, it is possible, it can be predicted, okay? Or it's just hypothetical in nature. So semantics gets better understood by identifying also these modalities. So in conclusion, the mode of computer-mediated communication as a communications medium is neither simply speech-like nor simply written-like. So we cannot say that computer-mediated communication is speech-like, okay? It's just spoken in nature, or it's simply written-like, okay? Or it's the same with written discourses. No, because computer-mediated communication has a set of unique features, okay? Though CMC bears similarities in its textual aspects, for example, when you contrast CMC with written discourses, you could really identify that there are types or tokens, there is lexical density, okay? It differs greatly in other aspects as well. For example, the pronoun usage, okay? So when you, for example, converse or communicate using emails, sometimes there is more connection unlike when you say it in a spoken way, okay? Or when it's written, for example, it's on a different platform, not computer mediated, then the use of pronouns could be totally different from when you communicate or from when you use pronouns in a computer mediated setting or in a virtual community. And as mentioned a while ago, modal auxiliary use may also be one factor that to be looked at in terms of contrasting elements among these three types of discourses: written, spoken, and computer-mediated communication. So basically, that's it. That's the research. And I hope that you have fully understood now the differences among these three by looking at the ideational and the interpersonal and the textual aspects according to Halliday. So these are three aspects that we can look at. So if you have any questions with regard to this discussion, you are free to post them in the open forum in our online classroom. Thank you very much for listening and or watching to this video discussion.